Hello, welcome to the Trews, True News. Today I'm here with Johan Hari, writer of this book, which I've read and endorsed, Chasing the Scream, which is about the war against drugs. All right, Johan.
Hi, Russell. How you doing?
I'm quite well. On this, we're going to try to chart the inception and enactment of the drug war, are we, and see if it's something that's working?
Yeah, basically the book is about, I went on this, we had addiction in my family and I wanted to understand, why did the drug war start? Why do we continue with it when so many people can see it doesn't work? What really causes drug addiction? And what are the alternatives like? So I went on a big kind of 30,000 mile journey to 8 different countries to try to really find people whose stories would tell us what had really happened with the war on drugs.
Let's have a look.
In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes. You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will.
That was at a time when they were telling you cigarettes were good as gold, probably. Harmless-looking cigarettes, which we know are harmless and fun.
As he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Probably best not to show people having such a fantastic time.
Well, wait a minute, Russell. It's not going to work out so well.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide.
The man who created all this propaganda, it's a really fascinating story. When we think about why drugs were banned, right, we tend to assume that it would be for the reasons that we would give if you asked us now. We don't want kids to use, you don't want people to become addicted. That's not the reason they gave at all. The guy the kind of founder of the modern war on drugs, a man called Harry Anslinger, who's probably the most influential man no one's ever heard of, gave a completely different reason. He took over the Department of Prohibition, alcohol prohibition, just as alcohol prohibition was ending. So he's got this massive government department with nothing to do. He had said previously that marijuana was completely harmless, that didn't have any problem with it. Suddenly he discovers that it's the most evil thing in the world when it will keep him and his department in a job. And he created all these myths. He latched onto one particular case, a boy called Victor Licata in Florida, who'd gone crazy and hacked his family to death. And Harry Anslinger, with the right-wing press, with the Fox News of its time, the Hearst press, basically says, look, this is what will happen. You'll hack your family to bits. Years later, people go look at the psychiatric file. No evidence the guy had even used marijuana. His family had had insanity for a long time. They'd actually recommended he be in an asylum before. So the book tells the story of lots of different people, but one of them is this man who launched the war on drugs.
Only one drug is so addictive, 9 out of 10 laboratory rats will use it. And use it. And use it. Until dead.
Why would you even give rats cocaine for? It seems a terrible thing to do. They're annoying enough just for their normal personalities, but I can see you're aching to tell your rat park story.
It's called cocaine, and it can do the same thing to you.
This is the thing that most blew my mind. If you had said to me 4 years ago, Johan, what causes drug addiction, right? I would have looked at you as if you were a bit thick, and I would have said, well, obviously drugs cause drug addiction.
And why don't you know, Russell, one of the world's most famous recovery drug addicts?
Basically, we all have a theory of addiction that was created 100 years ago, right? Which is basically, if you, me, the 3 people in this room, the next 20 people walking past here, if we all used heroin for 20 days, on day 21 we'd all be smack addicts because we think that there are chemical hooks in the drug that mean our body would physically need it on day 21. The way that was proven was by experiments like that were done in the 30s. You get a rat, you put it in a cage, it's on its own, and it's got 2 water bottles. One is water, just tap water, I doubt it's Evian, and one is water laced with either cocaine or heroin. If you do that, the rat always prefers the drugged water, almost always, and almost always kills
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, and almost always kills itself, right? Except in the 70s, this guy I got to know well, Bruce Alexander, who's a professor in Vancouver, comes along and says, hang on a minute, we're putting the rat in an empty cage, it's got nothing else to do, let's try this differently. So he built Rat Park, which is like heaven for rats. Everything your rat about town can want, it's got it in Rat Park. It's got lovely food, loads of friends, loads of sex, anything a rat wants. And they've got both the water bottles. But what's fascinating, so the drugged water and the normal water. And of course they try both because they don't know what's in it. But what's mind-blowing is, in Rat Park, they just don't like the drugged water. They don't use it very much. None of them ever overdose. I don't like it. What Bruce says about this is it shows us that both the right-wing kind of Peter Hitchens theory of addiction and the kind of nicer left-wing theory of addiction are both wrong. So the right-wing theory is, you're morally flawed, you indulge yourself, blah, blah, blah. The left-wing theory is, it's an addiction, it hijacks your brain. Actually, what Bruce says, it's not you, it's not your brain, it's the cage you live in. There's loads of human examples of that. It tells us the whole theory of addiction we've got is wrong. And that's really relevant to the war on drugs, because if what causes the addiction is the drug, then it might make sense. I don't think we can physically do it, but it might make sense to say, let's round up all the drugs and physically destroy them. If actually it's not the drug, if it's your environment, if actually your environment's so awful you would find something, that tells us we've got to do it totally differently.
Context is a thing then.
Turns out
Context is a thing.
The war on drugs imposes tremendous costs on all of us. But people are reluctant to consider alternatives to it because they're afraid that if we allow...
And the alternative is do your own thing. Intoxicate yourself
if we allow drugs to be legal, that everyone will be addicted, everyone will be criminals, and everyone will create problems. And in fact, what I'm trying to show is that that's not the case. The biggest component of what you're talking about involves legal drugs. My point
It doesn't matter whether it's legal or illegal. Pinheads like you are encouraging intoxication when it's one of the worst things in our society.
It matters if people are going to prison for doing something that doesn't violate anybody else's rights.
Bill's using his by now recognisable style of hectoring rage to deal with problems that require compassion.
You irresponsible libertines cause so much damage to this society, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
It's so interesting when you look at something like that and you realise they talk in this ridiculous big abstract way and you try to relate it to real people. It bears no relationship, and particularly with O'Reilly, the most important place to talk about in rebutting O'Reilly is Portugal. In the year 2000, Portugal had one of the worst drug problems in Europe, right? 1% of the population was addicted to heroin. That's a lot of heroin addicts. And they had been trying the American way for years and years, getting tougher and tougher, more and more people in prison. And every time they did it, the problem just got worse. So they decided to set up a scientific panel and just say, look, tell us what to fucking do. And the amazing doctor who led that, Dr. João Goulão, came back and said, let's decriminalise everything, from cannabis to crack, and let's transfer all the money we currently spend on arresting and harassing drug users and spend all of that on really good drug treatment, and particularly reconnecting addicts with society. So what we do in Britain and America is cut addicts off. You get a criminal record, so it's harder to get a job. You get put in prison. Portugal, it's all about reconnecting them. So it's things like subsidised jobs for addicts. If you're an addict, you got addicted and you were a mechanic, they'll say to someone, employ this guy as a mechanic, we'll pay half his wages. If you want to set up a business, they'll get addicts to get together and set up businesses. This has been going on for nearly 15 years now. And we've got the results in. Drug addiction went down dramatically. Injecting drug use went down by 50%.
You want to get stoned? Have a good time. Don't get in a car and don't come near my family.
So there we go, we've seen the Fox News perspective. Fox News helps to create a context in which fear and punitive measures are the dominant ideology. As a person that's had drug addiction issues, I know that that isn't helpful context. What would you say after having written this book?
Well, the alternatives work incredibly well. If you spend time with people on the ground, from a transsexual crack dealer in Brooklyn to a hitman for the Zetas in Mexico, to the countries where they've actually gone beyond it, the evidence is what we're doing now is a fucking disaster, and the alternatives work incredibly well. Nowhere has ever gone beyond the drug war and regretted it. The alternatives work. There is a better way waiting for us, based on love and compassion and not on hatred and violence. Very
simple message. And I spoke to that bloke in Portugal that instigated their new system. He said that even the most far-right parties would not return to the old way. So there are alternatives, that in just many of the alternatives are prevented from getting airtime. Context is important. True News, subscribe here.
A tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the news. If the news was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.